トビデオ
About a year ago, I did a video on the 1987 anime film Dirty Pair Project Eden.
失礼。
いつまで触ってんの。
あ、いや、しかし話せば見えちゃう。
I didn't like it. As someone who likes Dirty Pair, nay, loves Dirty Pair, Project Eden was the bitterest of disappointments to me. The plot is completely wasted, the pacing is awful, the villain is completely uncompelling in spite of his striking character design, and for most of the movie, the lovely angels are shackled to the world's least likable himbo.
いい子だから邪魔すんじゃない。いいな。
For a Dirty Pair movie, it completely misses the mark about what makes the Dirty Pair franchise so special. And yet, people still defend it. Dirty Pair Project Eden is sort of a retro anime sacred cow in some circles, and it's not really a mystery as to why that is. Project Eden is an anime defined by its glorious visuals and animation. It's an 80s anime to end all 80s anime. It's some of the best work ever produced by the men and women at Sunrise in that time period, and it's quite possibly the best looking Dirty Pair anime. And as someone who adores that aesthetic, it just makes Project Eden all the more discouraging. I want to like this anime that seems tailor-made to me, but it's just not letting me. All it is just empty spectacle. If only there was an anime out there that had the same hyperpop art stylings of Project Eden, but actually have me like it. Okay, I'll take it.
全てイミテーションのバーゲンセール。だから奴らは本物を欲しがっているのさ。
本物？本物？本物ってなんだ？
私のことらしいの。アイスって呼んでちょうだい、ライデンのおじさん。
Ice City, or Love City as some websites have it listed, was an OVA film released in 1986. That description obviously does not do this anime justice, and neither will anything else I will say for the next 20 minutes. I am not exaggerating when I say that nothing I talk about here will come close to capturing the wild, consciousness-expanding mindfuck this anime is. We're dealing with an anime that almost defies description just because of how little it resembles anything else that exists. Frankly, you are better off pausing this video, finding this anime, and going into Ice City cold because any attempt of me making a plot summary of this anime would just ruin the experience. But I think in order to give you an idea of what we're up against in this video, here's a brief description of roughly the first 5 minutes of this film. So a mysterious gang of street punks are chasing down a car driven by Dirk Diggler and his passengers preteen Debbie Harry, a cartoonishly drunk detective, and Garfield.
Oh brother, here we go again.
Diggler reveals to the detective, whose name is Raiden, that his name is K, and Debbie's name is I. And those names are actually puns on their code names of K and I. The cat's name is Cat. The street punks chasing them down are actually psychic warriors led by a beautiful woman named K2, a female clone of K. She is a member of the sinister organization called Fraud, who are implied to have fabricated the entire reality of Ice City. And the reason they are after I is because she's the only thing that's real in the city. K2 uses her psychic powers to try to subdue the team, which manifests as a 16-segment display of her power level on her forehead, first by her gang of punks, and then by a tanker truck, which then explodes. After those fail, K2 takes matters into her own hands and confronts her male counterpart directly. They engage in psychic warfare before K's own 16-segment display goes into overdrive and hits the infinity signal. This causes K to blast K2 with a psychic wave so powerful that it incinerates her clothes and flings her through the wall of reality. Detective Raiden takes a big swig from his flask. And out of all of that, those first 5 minutes are the least crazy parts of this movie. Ice City is one of those hidden treasures of retro anime that you are so glad that you were able to get your hands on. It's honestly a pity that it's not more well known here in the States. The only release of it was a subtitled VHS in the 90s from Right Stuf International, who, despite appearing to still hold the license for it, have yet to release it on DVD or Blu-ray. This is anime that really needs to be seen to be believed. For this reason alone, it comes highly recommended from WA. Seek it out, watch it, and prepare to be amazed. But the funny thing is that if I were reviewing this from a more objective perspective, I would have to confess that iCity isn't a particularly great anime. It's got quite a few problems, yes, and we'll get to those, but iCity succeeds in being a better anime than Project Eden in spite, maybe even because of these problems in the first place. The origins of iCity begin, like most anime, in manga. A 2-volume one that ran for exactly 1 year and 1 month, written by Shuho Idahashi, or as he's known by his pen name, Seoful. Not much is known about who Idahashi is as a creator or what his specific philosophy behind his works, as most of them have either gone untranslated or have been long out of print, but his art alone speaks volumes of what kind of creator he is. He definitely strikes me as someone who was influenced by the older generation of science fiction writers, someone who has taken Arthur C. Clarke's Third Law to heart, crafting fantastical science fiction odysseys to completely bend the will of reality. Considering Idahashi's classic sci-fi stylings, you probably wouldn't think he would get an anime. This was the period where most science fiction anime were being highly influenced by the newer school of the genre like Star Wars and Alien. But popular anime franchises of this time period were titles like Space Adventure Cobra and Dirty Pair, anime that originated from and embodied the old school science fiction tales. So an anime like iCity, a seemingly very cerebral William Gibson type of story, was totally within the realm of possibility. Producing this film would be the work of Ashi Productions, who, despite indulging in the bargain bin of the OVA market at this time,
God damn it! Where the hell is Jack? Fucking chicken shit! Fucking shit!
We're also producing some big budget anime film adaptations of very popular yet still very niche books, with Vampire Hunter D and Great Digital Targets. But the glue holding all of this together would be its director, Koichi Mashimo, the same Mashimo who would go on to direct Project Eden. You see the connection here. iCity is the source for the aesthetic that made Project Eden so beloved. This is the anime where Mashimo sharpened his blade and delivered the fluorescent new wave dream that is that anime's only saving grace. But watching iCity made me realize that the whole colorful art direction was actually toned down for Project Eden. That's right, the pop dayglow direction is on full blast throughout iCity. This is retro anime style at its most relentless. At all times, the screen is just filled with the deepest coloring imaginable. No color goes to waste. Every part of the rainbow will be used, and in some fairly creative ways as well. It's not every day you see burnt umber and forest green be used in shading. This unique art direction is the work of Torao Arai, whose specialty is resplendent backdrops with beautiful use of coloring and gradients. He's also not afraid of stylization. The Patrick Nagel-inspired art direction of California Crisis is also his doing. iCity is kind of similar to that anime in how its direction is presented less like an anime and more like a piece of pop art. But whereas California Crisis was going for a more glamorous, airbrushed Americana style, iCity instead seeks a more fantastical yet gritty art style that befits such a psychedelic odyssey. In other words, pause almost any frame and it could be the cover of a classic rock album. But unlike California Crisis, iCity is a far bigger production, and subsequently has far better animation to boot. Mashimo knows how to block action scenes to always make the motions kinetic and the camera dynamic. There can never be a dull moment because these are scenes that need to keep moving and building to an inevitable climax. And he is able to achieve this by having a lot of talented hands on board like Koji Ito, who is there to give the action scenes the motion they deserve. Animation director Shuichi Iguchi also did the character designs for iCity, and he did good work in translating the manga's more absurd character designs into designs that actually look kind of believable. He has such talent that he can make a naked old man lounging in a 20-foot tall environmental suit filled with strawberry sun-kissed look believable. And you know I could not make that up even if I tried.
わしゃ先に一杯もらっておるぞ、クラグアリー。
ライロチ、貴様、いつの間にここへ。
それというのか、このわしに向かって。まだうまい酒が残っておるのに。
But what links every one of these visual elements together is Mashimo's creative direction. He savors every moment of this film and lets no scene go to waste with sloppy direction. If there's a technique that serves a scene well, he will do it. flashback scenes are acted out almost as if they're little silent movies, and if flashbacks are of memories from long ago, they are portrayed as much simpler and hazier to give the feeling of someone trying to maintain a grip on almost forgotten memories. And let's not forget doing an entire extremely well choreographed fight scene with the main character's theme song blaring in the background about how much of an awesome psychic he is.
Here's a man, here's a special man, here's a psychic fighter, fighting for justice, for the peace of our lives every day. And
it's almost too much, really. In fact, it is too much. If I could criticize something about the anime's visual style, is that it could be very disorienting and not everyone's cup of tea as a result. As much as I do want to recommend this anime to people, I would totally not recommend it if you are particularly prone to seizures. There are definite Electric Soldier Porygon moments in this anime, and I am being very careful not to show them in this video for your safety. But regardless, the visuals are what carries this movie to the finish line, and not the story. I know it's weird that I say Ice City is better than Project Eden when I keep hinting that it has the same problems as Project Eden, a flashy Sakuga-filled spectacle that barely hides a poor plot. But the thing about Project Eden is that it is attached to a franchise I hold dear and completely misrepresents said franchise in an embarrassing manner. Therefore, it being a disappointment is par for the course. Ice City has no such baggage, which is why I feel more forgiving towards it. Does this absolve Ice City of any storytelling sins? Nuh-uh. Ice City's main problem as a story is that there's too much of it. It's constantly in danger from collapsing under its own weight. While the beginning, as I described, might feel appropriately insane to make you feel somewhat curious about what this movie is about, it's actually a pretty lousy way to open the movie. A loud car chase with characters who are given the barest of introductions screaming entire pages of exposition at the audience avatar and Detective Raiden is probably a lot to put on the audience just tuning in.
俺のコードネームは K。それに奴らもただのガキじゃない。
And speaking of exposition, this is some of the most ham-fisted exposition I've ever seen in an anime. I and K are vomiting up the plot summary to this detective in such a detailed manner that it only makes sense when you realize this anime began in media res.
吉岡ライデン、34歳、元警察官。フラウドに関わる事件を調査中、上司と対立、懲戒免職になる。仕方なくシース探偵を改良するが、未だに客はゼロ。
Because the story is so large, a lot of the dialogue is long-winded bouts explaining either what has happened or what's going to happen in an attempt to just streamline the narrative wherever possible. It sucks because the bits of dialogue where the characters can actually be characters are effective in providing them some depth. Kei's want as a character is to protect Ai and have her live a normal life, having a very surrogate father-daughter relationship with her.
ずっと前から決めてたんだよ。お前は俺が、いや、パパが守るって。
Although, treating the clone of your dead girlfriend as your young daughter is a bit weird and kind of Freudian. Of course, there's also the pointless romance subplot between Raiden and K2. After breaking through the reality wall, K2 winds up with amnesia and ends up falling for Raiden, who saved her life, going from a cold-blooded, unfettered dominatrix to a flighty broad fawning over a 34-year-old schlub.
お前は K2 が好きだったのか？答えるんだ。
好きでした。すいません。やったおじさま。
I'm not saying this subplot is completely self-indulgent, but events do transpire to cause K2 to be wearing a bunny outfit for the rest of the picture. Although she does get a giant laser bazooka to go with it, so at least she has completed the ensemble. But this ties back into what I think is the reason why Ice City has too much story. The narrative can never figure out what it wants to be. I don't want to give too much away with how the story plays out because, like I said, you should see it for yourself. But for the most part, it feels like it's going for this psychedelic cyberpunk narrative with psychics and the implication that all of this is taking place in an elaborate computer simulation. The main thing driving the plot is Ai's status as the only thing in the simulation that can be considered real. But at the beginning of Act 3, 3, it completely switches gears and becomes a biopunk horror story. The protagonist and antagonist team up to fight a new threat, and a lot of the psychic and simulation plot points seem to get hand-waved away in favor of this new 11th hour plot point about biopollution and false DNA and the like.
無限クローニングプロセスの中で偶然発見された遺伝子重合体アロイの出現によって培養層は現実のものとなった。
And right at the end, there's a moment where the simulation implications come back, and the whole thing feels like it wants to be this meta commentary on the nature of stories and endings, and it really just ends on one big question mark. Because of how much it switches genres, iCity also cannot keep clear, consistent themes. The central theme appears to be the nature of reality, and how accepting reality, flaws and all, is the true goal one must aspire to. But it all appears to be muddled in the narrative. If anything, it just comes off as complete filler. In fact, iCity's story as a whole is just filler. It only exists to give the visual structure and to have a means to get from one visually maximalist set piece to another. And it might sound crazy here, but I think the anime knows this. In the beginning, right before I and Kei finish up their big expository spiel, Detective Raiden says he does not understand what's happening at all. The two of them reassure him that what he understands and what he doesn't understand doesn't really matter. What really matters is what he thinks of what he believes is happening.
一体どうなってんだよ。ちゃんと説明しろ、ちゃんと。
説明してもおじさんにはわからないわよ、きっと。
世の中には信じられないこと、いや信じたくないことがたくさんあるぞ。
青い印なもん言うんだよね。
Complicated and roundabout answer, yes, but to me, if we want to continue talking about how this anime is a lot more meta with its discussions of reality and fakeness, what I'm getting is that this anime doesn't seem to care if you understand what's happening in the story or not. What ultimately matters is what you are seeing with your very eyes and what you get out of it. In short, it's the anime telling us to just sit back, strap in, and enjoy the ride. iCity knows that its main appeal is just its wild visuals, and it's not afraid to say that you can just ignore the story if you want to, and just feast on trashy 80s anime aesthetics at their most extreme. And that's what I got out of iCity, an enjoyable neon trip. It's psychedelic, it's extravagant, it will totally cause eye strain if you watch it in a completely dark room like I did, but it is never boring. I skimmed over a lot of the truly wild stuff that happens in this anime because I cannot and should not spoil every outrageous turn the plot goes into. It would just water down the experience of watching iCity for the first time. If you want an anime from the 80s that's just nothing but the retro anime stylings taking beyond their tasteful limits, then I highly recommend iCity. Just be sure you don't go too mad from the uncompromising colors and visuals.
I can see through time.